Welcome to the Women's Football Show here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Kerry Paul, joined here with Blair Malloy, and our special guest this week is former Glasgow City, Celtic and Motherwell defender Emma Black. Before we get to Emma, thanks for joining us here today. Let's have a look at the results from the weekend. At Ibrox it finished Rangers 7, Hibernian 0, Partick Thistle 0, Celtic 3. It was a close one between Glasgow City, but it was Glasgow City 3, Aberdeen 2, Spartans 3, Hearts 4, Hamilton 1, Montrose 1, Motherwell 6, Dundee United 0. Rangers Hibs, let's start with that, Emma. A convincing win for Joe Potter's side. Yeah, it was, and they went into that game in good form. You know, I think if you look at their previous results, they'd been scoring many goals and not conceding. And also what's pleasing for Joe Potter, and that's her side, is bringing players back from injury. You know, the likes of Rachel Rowe has been brought back in, Brogan Hay has been brought back in, Lizzie Arnott was made the bench on Sunday also. So that'll be pleasing for her also, especially with the bigger games coming up now. And, you know, I've spoken to the Rangers players, quite a few of them, and also to Joe Potter, and what they want to create there is a winning environment. Have that winning mentality, you know, because it's been a disappointing season for them last season, you know, missing out in Champions League, missing out in the league title, of course, especially at Ibrox. So for me, they've certainly obviously had that revamp on and off the pitch, and obviously it's proven successful so far. You know, they've had 10 games so far in the league and they're unbeaten, and in the quarterfinals of the Sky Sports Cup. So yesterday's performance, they had to put on a show. I think if you're playing at any big stadium, those clubs, you have to put on a show. And now those teams like the likes of Rangers, there's a product there to attract supporters to come along, and we've seen that yesterday at Ibrox. So it was an excellent show, excellent game they put on, excellent performance, you know, and I think for me the standout player was Kirsty Howat, you know, scoring 4 goals. Yeah, definitely. How impressed have you been with her this season so far? So impressed, you know, when she made the move from Glasgow City to Rangers, she didn't quite get a run of games at Rangers, you know, because Jane Ross was there, so she couldn't quite break into the starting 11 and play a lot of minutes, so it was a kind of a stop-start for her, and then obviously it's worked in her favour last season. You know, unfortunately Jane Ross had that ACL injury, so she was then able to get a run of games, and she's just progressed and got better and better as the games have went on, and I'm sure she got Player of the Month for September, and then also she got her call up to the A squad in the national team. So I think that'll be something that we'll see more often from Kirsty Howat, and just her performance yesterday was so good. It's just her link-up play as well, and it's having that relationship with Hardy and Rachel Rowe, that trio up top, and she's certainly playing extremely well. Yeah, definitely. Blair, how important will these high scorelines be when it comes to the end of the season, like we saw at the end of last season when it was just so tight between the top 3? Yeah, I think it's vital. I think when you see that sort of trifecta at the top of the table, Glasgow, Celtic, Glasgow City and Rangers all kind of battling out to the very last day as we've seen last season. Goal difference is obviously going to play a massive part, and I think you've seen that this year with Rangers, Celtic and Glasgow City really putting that onus on their forward line. Kirsty Howat really epitomising it yesterday with the 4 goals, which is great for any striker, and I think that when it comes down to the end of the season, these goals are really going to matter. Yeah, definitely. Well, the big talking point yesterday was indeed the game was at Ibrox instead of Broadwood. Let's hear what the Rangers boss had to say about the occasion.
Yeah, I loved it. It's great. You know, these are the stadiums that you want to be playing in. The pitch is beautiful. I think you can see it really helps us in our style of play and how we want to play football. And it was really nice to, you know, see the girls with a smile on their faces and enjoying it too.
Well, Emma, you've definitely led your team out at big stadiums. How did that feel doing that? Did you enjoy that? Yeah, I certainly did. And, you know, the standout for me was the Parc des Princes, PSG quarterfinals of the Champions League. So, yeah, it's just very emotional, you know, and obviously you arrive early before obviously the kick-off, so you're told to go out and sample the atmosphere and get a grip of your environment where you are, and to make sure it doesn't drain your energy, because I think sometimes that could happen. When you go out onto a big stadium, it can just like the overwhelming feeling of it. So we did that, and even when we went out for a warm-up, there was already like 10,000 supporters there already, and that's something that at that time we weren't used to. We were like, wow. But no, and then obviously when the game starts, when that whistle goes, you kind of just blank it out as a footballer, and you just focus on obviously the game in hand, what's in front of you. So, but what a feeling it is.
Do you think that obviously the teams that are maybe affiliated more with men's teams, Celtic, Rangers, and they have access to these stadiums, the bigger arenas, as opposed to a Glasgow City, do you think it gives an unfair advantage to the likes of Rangers and Celtic to be able to host games in these arenas?
I think it certainly gives obviously the home teams advantage, there's no doubt about that. I think you'd seen it yesterday, you've seen the build-up even on social media from Rangers. Try to entice the supporters along, they had the fan zone open. And even when I arrived at the stadium, I arrived an hour and 20 minutes or so before kick-off, there was a real buzz. And there was already loads of supporters there, young kids, boys and girls, families, wandering about outside the stadium, buying scarves, buying hats, flags. So there is a real buzz, but I think there also is an advantage. Of course there is.
Do you think that's a sort of natural progression then for the women's game to start opening it up to these bigger stadiums to try and promote more people to come along? Or do you think it's more start off in a slightly smaller stadium, maybe get more fans in and maybe create more of an atmosphere? Or would you rather see it go to these big stadiums straight away and go, OK, let's try and get as many people in as possible?
Not straight away. I think it was good in terms of the way that the league had structured, in terms of there's got to be certain criteria for the stadiums, like Petersall, for example, Broadwood, for example. There's got to be a seating area, tannoy, food, drink, etc. So that's all been achieved from every club in SWPL 1. So I think now the natural progression would be, can we get access to the main stadiums? And you've seen obviously the rewards from it. You see obviously the amount of supporters that turned up yesterday at Ibrox. For me, I don't think you would have seen those amount of supporters at Broadwood. I think for me, when Rangers play their home games, there is a number of supporters, maybe 200-300 that turn up at Broadwood. But if that game was at Broadwood yesterday, it'd be the same supporters. Whereas when you're opening up those bigger stadiums, you're then allowing other people to come along. For me, I'm assuming like families were saying, let's go to Ibrox. And I think it's more a friendly environment also to take your young kids along. And there was like face painting, glitter, etc. All that kind of stuff going on out with the stadium. So I think that progression then has to be introduced to the men's stadiums. And I think you even look at Hearts and Hibs. They've got the record crowds up in Edinburgh for having the women's teams playing there. So I think for me, we have to see more of it, because then it will entice more supporters along. And as I said earlier, there is a product now on the pitch for these women's players. And then once those people turned up at Ibrox on Sunday, then you're then hoping that those numbers then turn up to this week's game, the Celtic and Rangers game.
Well, the record-breaking crowd, Blair, it was broken for Celtic last season at Celtic Park. And Fern Alonso's side, they beat Partick Thistle 3-0 at the weekend. Are they the favourites for you, Emma, considering they're quite far ahead? Well, 2 points just now.
Yeah, I still think it's going to be between the three top teams. But right now, you look at Celtic, obviously they've not dropped any points. 10 wins out of 10. They've certainly got a good blend of players there, good experienced players there also. And they've had players that have been there a long time that they've managed to retain. Although obviously they've lost the likes of Jacinta last season, Flint also, but they've managed to replace them and then keep their core group of players. So right now you could say, yeah, they're definitely favourites, but they had that real test against Glasgow City, and obviously Glasgow City had Weir sent off, so that gave them a slight advantage towards the end of the game, and they certainly capitalised on that. But it'll be a big test for them on Sunday when they come up against Rangers.
Well, Glasgow City, they were away to Aberdeen after their defeat in the Champions League. This was a huge opportunity for Aberdeen and they were unlucky. Yeah, they were. I was watching obviously the scores coming in as I was at Ibrox, and it was a shock for me when obviously Aberdeen had taken the lead. But I thought for myself and looking at it, there's no way Glasgow City are going to allow that to happen and lie down. So they had a good reaction, and that sometimes happens at times in terms of when you're playing Champions League football midweek, then you've then got to travel up to Aberdeen. It's almost like that hangover effect. Yeah.
Do you think that result during the week may have played a part yesterday? Because you would expect maybe Glasgow City to be a bit more comfortable yesterday, and obviously coming off the back of that disappointment during the week, that may have played this part yesterday. I
think it did. I think you could tell obviously with the performance and obviously conceding goals as well. That's not something that Glasgow City are renowned for, is conceding goals. So I thought it was going to be difficult for them, there's no doubt about that. And that would have been a chance for Aberdeen to try and take something from the game. Having looked at that, thinking they've just played Champions League, midweek game against a very good opposition, mentally drained, physically drained, and then back on the training field preparing for a trip away up to Aberdeen. So that was a good opportunity for Aberdeen to take something from it. But yeah, Glasgow City certainly struggled.
Glasgow City obviously dominant in the league, and obviously took the title last year, right up at the very top end of the Scottish League. How did they bridge that gap to the European performances? Because there was obviously quite a gulf during the week.
Yeah, there was. I think for me, Glasgow City, that they've been renowned for obviously doing extremely well in Champions League football. But I think for me now, the way they've changed the format, it makes it more difficult for all the teams involved now, because there's more teams that are coming through that are able to qualify for it.
Yeah.
So I think if they're going to find it extremely difficult now, when I looked at that fixture when it was drawn, I thought to myself, this is a real chance for Glasgow City to progress. I thought for me, looking at it, looking at the previous results, I thought, yep, they get a good result at Petershill, get a win, then go to the away fixture. For me, Glasgow City were going into that game as favourites. But they found it really, really tough. I think you could see that team were very, very good. They were very good attacking, and Glasgow City just couldn't cope with them. I think they were playing at a higher intensity that Glasgow City are not used to in the league. You get the games against, obviously, the likes of Celtic and Rangers, maybe Hearts at times, but that level, to go from here to there, is difficult at times. You can't just switch that on.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think it's a lack of competition domestically within their own country that maybe it doesn't lend itself to making that step up to the European stage?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's difficult. I think when I was playing with Glasgow City and when we were preparing for Champions League football at the latter stages and against professional teams, top teams, what we used to do is we used to play against men in friendlies to try and then bring the intensity levels up, because when you're playing against men, they're physically stronger, they're quicker, they move the ball quicker also. So it was trying to then, for us to adapt to play against men at that level in terms of can we match them, because it's going to be like that when you go to Champions League. So that certainly helped us in preparations for it. But as I says, it's so difficult, Blair, just to turn on that switch to go from playing the likes of, no disrespect, to like maybe Hamilton, for example, and then going to a Champions League game midweek.
You were part of a very successful Glasgow City side. How do you compare the competition then to now when you look at the top three teams?
In terms of in the league,
Yeah.
It's much more competitive now, there's no doubt about that. All the other teams round about are certainly improving. They've invested off the park as well, so most teams are now trying to go full time, which is obviously great for our game. So there has been improvements, but still not as improvements that I would like to see, because you still have the big name players who play for the national teams, like likes of Rachel Corsley, for example. They're all still playing with big teams down south, so our level of competition is still not there yet within our country. Because when young players coming through, look at the likes of Emma Watson, you know, she was a star at Rangers just for one season, and then Man United came in for her and away she went. So we're still not at that level, and it's still so difficult. Although it is much more competitive, it's not as competitive as we want it to be.
Well, when you've started off as a striker, am I right in saying, and then transitioned to defender. How was that, and how did that come about?
Maybe because I didn't score enough goals. I was playing as a striker and a winger, and in my early days at Glasgow City there was a couple of injuries to fullbacks, and then I was moved to left back, and I certainly enjoyed it. And then when I moved to left back, I then got a call up to the national squad. So then I thought to myself, well, this must be my position then. And I played fullback between left back and right back, international and at club level.
Just touching on that, you were saying a second ago about the players moving out of Scotland. Do you think, in terms of, obviously we've seen the success of the national side this weekend, the men's side qualifying for the Euros, do you think it's beneficial for the national team in the women's game for players to leave Scotland, to go down south as early as possible, or would you like to see them develop a bit more in Scotland?
I think it's difficult. I think, you look at Emma Watson, for example, just a young girl, 16, 17, and she was a standout within our league. So then, for her then to progress her career, she then has to make that move to make it more difficult for her and more challenging for her in a different environment against other players from around the world, effectively. When you go down south to the WSL, it's players around the world and it's all international players. So she then had to make that decision to then go to try and develop her career. And also the likes of Jenna Clark, she's been playing at Glasgow City for a number of years at centre-back, brought into the national team. So then she'll be looking at herself thinking, what's my next stage? How can I progress my career? And unfortunately, you do then have to go down south or overseas.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's have a look at the results table and see what that's done to that. Celtic, Rangers, Glasgow City still at the top. Blair, no disrespect to the teams underneath the top three. Do you see it being another three-horse race, or will the likes of Partick Thistle, Hearts, Hibernian run them to the very end.
Yeah, I don't think you can see anything other than a 3-horse race, to be honest. I think in terms of like the finances and the setup within Celtic, Rangers and Glasgow City there, I think they will be the three at the top of the table come the end of the season. Who's going to win out of those three? I wouldn't like to pick at this point. I think obviously next week is going to be huge between Celtic and Rangers. We'll come on to that in a little bit. But the teams just below them, I mean, I have been impressed this season. Hearts obviously with a great comeback yesterday. We had Eva Olid on the show not that long ago. I'm really impressed with what she's doing there as well. Specifically impressed with Partick Thistle as well.
Yes.
I think Brann doing a great job there. I think he's a great character. I think he's got them playing really good football. I would actually tip him to be the next manager of the men's team if he keeps going the way he's going.
Yeah.
And I think they have one of the best players in the league outside the top three. I think Cara Henderson is a great player. I think she's one of the best young players that Scotland have got to offer right now, and I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of years if a Celtic, she obviously came through the academy there, if a Rangers, if a Glasgow City come calling to try and pick her out of there.
Well, would you say that having Brian Graham as the manager there, having his playing career as an advantage to the girls?
Yeah, I think it can only be an advantage if he's still involved in the game at a professional level. He's obviously bringing in the professionalism from the men's outfit and his coaching style to try and adopt that to the women's game as well. I don't know if you found that yourself, and if you had people in and around the men's game, you said you played against men to try and prepare that, if that influenced the team and kind of brought them onto a different level.
Yeah, it did, and at times we had some players who were playing maybe in League 1 or League 2 who would come and join in our training sessions to try and obviously then bring the intensity up as well. So you'd watch what they were doing before the training sessions, after the training sessions, so that certainly does have an impact. And what you touched on there, Blair, for Partick Thistle, I've been so impressed with Partick Thistle. Even last season I was raving about how well they were doing, and then obviously this season as well. Even that win that they had away to Aberdeen just last week at 2-0, and I'm thinking that was for me it may have seemed a shocked result for other people who don't follow the women's game as often, but I wasn't certainly shocked at that result, absolutely not. And then they did extremely well against Celtic, to be fair, at the weekend as well.
Yeah, because I'm sure it was only 1-0 after 29 minutes, then they held out till about the 70th minute, and you wouldn't, like you said, you wouldn't think that objectively looking at a Partick Thistle, but I think they're a team that, well, Hibs traditionally maybe more of a powerhouse in the women's game, maybe rested on the laurels a little bit, not invested in the women's team quite as much. Partick Thistle are really stepping up through the gears and going, we want to have a proper shot at this, and I think the results are on the pitch. They're coming up, they're sitting just outside, just behind Hearts, just outside that top three. I don't think it's beyond them finishing fourth this season.
No, definitely not.
No, I totally agree.
Do you feel they'll push the top three as well, Emma?
I think they will. You can obviously see the performance on Sunday from Partick Thistle. They've got the ability, but then it's just having that lack of end product, that quality towards the end of games, also fitness levels. And when you're coming up against the top three as well, for any team below them, it's mentally and physically draining for them as well. It's because you're not getting much of the ball, so the play's all in front of you, so it's having those concentration levels, and then if you just switch off at any time, those quality teams and players can punish you.
Definitely will. We do have a big weekend coming up. Let's have a look at the fixtures this weekend. We have the first Old Firm game of the season. Celtic take on Rangers. Glasgow City will host Montrose. Hibernian face Hamilton. Spartans and Dundee United. Hearts take on Motherwell, and Aberdeen face Partick Thistle. I think the standout one is Celtic Rangers there. Is this the games where the league is perhaps won or lost, or is it a bit early to call it?
No, I don't think it's a bit early to call it. Absolutely not. I think obviously the top three, we spoke about it. I think it will be between the top three. You can look at the other teams that potentially could take points off the top three, but those three teams, when they play each other, it's all pressured games. Of course it is, because you even looked at the Glasgow City and Celtic game. It wasn't a great game to watch because it was almost two teams didn't want to then take a risk, to then take a chance to go forward and try and create opportunities and have no difference in terms of that's the way the Celtic and Rangers game will go, but it will certainly be a pressured game, and it's an Old Firm game. That adds to it, doesn't it?
Definitely.
It certainly does add to it. And Celtic, they'll be on high flying. You know, they've won 10 games out of 10. They've beaten Glasgow City, obviously through the week also, so they'll be thinking, we're going into this game as favourites.
Definitely.
Can we press you for a winner on the first Old Firm game this season?
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to say a draw. I'm going to sit on the fence.
Sit on the fence. Well, hopefully we see a big crowd at that one. Let's just go back to the Rangers Hibs game though, Blair, and see what the fans had to say about that game being at Ibrox at the weekend.
It's great for girls like Ellie, young girls, to come along to Ibrox today to see women playing in a stadium the size of this. and just creates the opportunities for the likes of the younger ones moving forward.
I think it's great that they are actually getting to play at Ibrox Stadium, the home of the famous Glasgow Rangers, so I think that's great, yeah.
It shows us how big the game's getting for the girls and where we can be in a couple of years' time.
It's really important to let them play in front of the big stadiums and the big crowds, get a bit more visibility. Young lady here's just starting out playing football as well, so she's taking a bit of an interest in it all of a sudden now. So it's good to get them along and let them to see and experience the big stadium atmosphere as well.
I love the fact that women's football's becoming like really kind of thought of now, and it is really important. I love the fact that they're back at Ibrox as well. Hopefully they get a good crowd in today.
Yep, a lot of chat this week about playing at the bigger stadiums and the crowds following the women's team. Alison sat down this week with Scott McDonald and he had his say on the Women's World Cup in Australia and the massive following that generated over there.
Like you said there, what was really amazing was the crowds. It wasn't just Matilda's games where we were getting sellouts all across the whole tournament, which made it so partisan. And it was nice to go down the streets and see all the different colours and the support and just everyone having a good time. And really in Australia have never seen that before when it comes to world football. So there is big talks now of Australia now bidding for the Men's World Cup, which would be amazing because we have all the venues. So it'd be great for the game as well, and what the women's games managed to do for Australian football, particularly during, as all people did, it was tough in COVID, but financially I think the FA were in a bit of strife, and if it wasn't for the Matildas, you have to say, in terms of their success then and bringing sponsorship in and everything else, then I think it would have been an even bigger struggle.
Emma, how do we build on the interest that we have on the women's game in terms of bringing more fans in?
I think it's difficult, of course it is. I think what's pleasing is having those access to the main stadiums. I think that's the way we've got to go down. I think I touched on, you look at the crowd that was there on Sunday, and then obviously you looked at the crowd that was obviously at Parkhead last season, at Tynecastle, at Easter Road. I think that's the road that we've got to go down, and you just obviously seen and heard from the parents or carers and the young girls that was interviewed there that they're getting to go to a big stadium to then see these women play. And there's as I said, there's a product now that you can actually go and watch and enjoy it and follow it. So I think the line we've got to go down is getting access to those big stadiums for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. On behalf of myself, thanks to Blair, thanks to Emma for joining us this week. Join us next week where we'll have some more SWPL action to look forward to.